Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Thank you for coming today. I'm Eric Philbrick, the director of the museum here and co-curator of the exhibition. Eric Fischl is here. We'll catch up with him in a minute. He's in the exhibition. This exhibition I mentioned was, there's a co-curator, that's Jodi Throckmorton from the San Jose Museum of Art. So the exhibition opens here at PAFA and will then travel to San Jose in the fall. The genesis of the show is that as I was just telling Peter, had the idea to do a project with Eric and to focus on process and how he makes his paintings. And when I talked with him about that, he said, well, you ought to talk to San Jose. They had a similar idea. So I called Susan Crane, who's the director there, and lo and behold, they had been thinking for a number of years about a similar project. So we joined forces and put this exhibition together. It's come together quite quickly. We started working in September, and we've produced the exhibition, the catalog, which you've seen. We're also working with Checkerboard Films on a 25-minute film. We'll have a short version of that tomorrow for the opening, and the full version in July. What the exhibition really explicates is how Eric Fischl's process of composing work has changed over the last 30 years. This is the earliest piece in the exhibition from 1979, if memory serves, and that over there is the latest piece from about 2 years ago. And this sort of gives you a nutshell of the evolution of Eric's creative process, going from gesture drawings as studies to ending up using the camera and Photoshop as a way to draw and to compose the image. So as we go through the exhibition, you'll see paintings from throughout Eric's career, from the late 70s through to today. And that process of apprehending images using a camera, Eric takes pictures all the time. You may have noticed just now he was here taking pictures and walking through the exhibition taking pictures. And in the beginning of his career, he started by printing out little snapshots. Remember, it was the 70s, and you printed out a photo and you got a little snapshot. And might have 2 or 3 images that he's working from, and looking at those maybe through a loop and composing the painting on the canvas. Then eventually, realizing that some of the figures that he'd taken photographs of were really interesting, and he was wondering what they might look like from another angle, so began making small clay maquettes or models of those figures so that he could see them in 3 dimensions. Then photographing those maquettes to get light and shade issues worked out, and also to put these different characters in different relationships. So we've got all of those, or a whole selection of those photographs that you'll see as well. And then drawings and collages and small canvases based on those studies. So there's a whole kind of back and forth between the photo, the image, the photo, the sculpture. It keeps talking to each other. And then we'll segue into a series called the Creffield Project, where Eric worked with a couple of models over a series of 3 or 4 days, photographing them in a modernist house. We have the full suite of photographs that were produced from that series, and also 3 of the major canvases that resulted from those photographs. Then we end up with some more recent work where you can really see the Photoshop process. So instead of collaging photographs together with three-dimensional pieces of paper, collaging them together, collaging together in the computer. So it's a process of composition before you get to painting that has evolved very much. The process of painting itself stays quite consistent, but the compositional process has evolved. So this painting of a woman surrounded by dogs is a good example of an early painting where Eric was working from discrete photographs, one of the woman, one of the dog, one of the cages, and having these little photographs and working up the painting based on those photographs. The glassine that you see here is a technique that Eric used for a number of years to study different compositional possibilities. So this one is from 1980. It's called Saturday Night, the Aftermath Bath. And it's a way to place figures in different locations, move them around a little bit, maybe, have a person not looking this way, but looking this way just by flipping the glassine around backwards. You can change the composition. So it was a way to develop composition and also to impose a figure over a painting in process. You could paint on glassine and hang that figure over the painting and see how it looked. And one of our centerpiece paintings, I guess you'd say, called Dog Days from 1983. And this again is a painting where the source material was maybe imagery from a magazine in terms of the location, and photographs that you had taken or you found in a magazine for the people?
Some I had taken, some I invented. Well, one of the things that has always fascinated me is time, the element of time in painting. And so in a situation like this, where you have two very similar environments, this could be two scenes taking place on different floors of the same condominium in, you know, a Florida beach kind of architecture or something like that, or it could be the same patio two different times. And there's something I don't expect viewers to get. Maybe it's just a visual joke for me, but if you notice in this painting, the dogs are the same color as the two kids are, right? And so for me, what I was sort of, you know, yakking away at myself as I was painting the painting, amusingly sort of yakking away, was the possibility that, you know, when she's around their dogs, and when she's not around, their kids exploring their growing sexual awareness. So anyway, but I don't expect the audience at large to kind of pick up on that inside joke. But
it
basically, that sense.
It does suggest a kind of a loneliness too after the first flush bloom of youth.
Yeah.
When your partner has flown the coop and you're with the dogs only on the balcony.
And I think that loneliness is further emphasized. Those are Basenjis, the dogs, and they don't bark. So it's like an element of silence, a kind of canine pathos, but inexpressible, you know, kind of feeling. So
Eric took a series of photographs over 6 years in Saint-Tropez, from which these are gathered, and they're just very studies of people on the beach. And this one woman, you can see, appears in this sketch on the back of a folder in various different guises, looking left, looking right, in very casual sketches, in larger oil studies, in small oil paintings and monoprints. And then as we circle over to this area of the exhibition, that whole exploration of the figure is really kind of revealed through the photographs of the clay maquettes that I mentioned. And you can see the figure returns here. Here she is. And you can also see Eric, these are really from Eric's studio that we borrowed these, and you can see sketches here, studying light and dark, as I mentioned. And then with these, with the monoprint, and this is a collage taken from a photograph here, you can see how that woman lying on her back and this girl holding the bathing suit are used over and over again, and they appear in prints, in a small bronze sculpture based on the clay sculpture that Eric did of that figure. And in dialogue before, Eric was talking about these different figures almost as characters and trying to imagine, you know, can I capture a certain attitude or a certain pose? Can I imagine what it would be like for, you know, a girl kind of walking down the beach, jauntily holding her bathing suit? Is that something that I can capture without having actually seen it? So the development of characters and characteristics. In these study pieces, you can see there's a whole series of photographs over here of just dozens and dozens of different views of the clay maquettes and working out different compositional relationships. And some of those you'll begin to pick out in certain paintings. There's a small painting over there of a figure looking through the arm of another figure, and that's based on a photograph of these maquettes, of manipulating the figures in relationship to each other. Eric, do you want to talk at all about your self-portrait as an old man? She's right over here.
It's not quite a self-portrait, it's titled Portrait of an Artist.
Okay.
Right, so it's definitely a projection. In a way, it's kind of self-explanatory, so I'll just talk anecdotally about the character himself, because I took a photograph of him. Maybe this is a little too much information, but I was with my father, who had rented a condominium in the south of France, and in an identical condominium next to his was a nudist colony. And he had access to it, and he was very excited about taking me over there. So we could walk through pretending we wanted to buy a condo in the nudist one. Anyway, when we came out, we were driving past the gated part, etc., and there was a car parked on the side of the road, and this guy was standing there. And clearly didn't have access to get into the condo, but wanted to sort of find a way into a naked community. And he caught me taking a picture of him as we drove by, so he covered himself, which I thought was rather funny.
It really has a guilty that peeping Tom quality.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
Caught in the middle of something.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I think a sad scene as well, because it's something where he's standing semi-exposed, totally vulnerable. Almost with these dark glasses that are almost like blinders. And he's standing in front of what could be construed as almost like Van Gogh's, crows in the wheat field kind of painting, that stunning, almost glow of, almost fiery glow of nature. Supposedly should be inspiring, and then he's sitting there with a blank canvas, so it kind of looks like he's run out of bullets.
This is like PAFA's answer to PMA's Arcadia. Contemporary twist. I mean, it's all these bathing people, from PMA to now PAFA.
It's the time.
I know, it's the time that it must be.
It's the zeitgeist, the Philadelphia zeitgeist.
Yeah. It's that wood there too, whatever painter that is.
What is the Arcadia show? I don't know.
Suzanne, bathers and everything is kind of earthly, utopia-based, women and men by water, nude, etc.
Gauguin,
Yeah, no, I think there's something really alive and potent about the beach environment. I think it's very complicated because on one hand it's totally elemental, right? It's this contrast between solid and liquid, and the liquid is actually a place we've come from, both in terms of our the way we live in water until we're born, but also genetically in terms of the evolution of man. And so it has this aspect to it that I think is, on some level, it might be just on a cellular memory level, it's a very powerful place to be. And so we gather there. And then it's also a place to relax, or to sort of a different sort of social body language than the body language of a working day, which brings into it the sensuality, sexuality, desire, that kind of thing. And And with that comes a lot of the cultural anxiety that Americans have around all of that stuff. And so I find it a really compelling space to work out of.
So I never just begun, but with this repeated motif of this woman, we have over and over again in various configurations, and then this is someone whose picture you snapped. You don't know this man.
I actually don't know the woman.
You don't know,
either.
Which is what I was assuming. So
yeah.
Oftentimes when we see a repeated figure in an artist, it's somebody in their family, it's somebody that they know, it's a model that they paint over and over. But would you say that many of the figures or many of your repeated figures are not people you know?
I would say they're all not people.
All not people you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're well, actually that's not true. There's some, in that one that's straight down there, the man standing over the girl, I know him. Yeah, you know, with this figure, it's one of those things, you can see the casualness in the photograph with which I just saw something snapped that nothing particularly, certainly nothing in the photograph that's interesting as a photograph. It's just, there was something about a figure that presents their back to it, mm-hmm. you know, that becomes a source of mystery. There's a kind of, and with her, there was a kind of strength to the back as well. So it had a kind of power and an impenetrability that I found compelling. And the look, it's almost Sphinx-like to me, the way she's gazing. And in several of these things, you see I was throwing things in front of her. I wanted to see what she was, you know, what would her body language be explained if I had a boy throwing a ball, if I had her watching TV, if I had her looking at these different people, et cetera, et cetera. What was it that could engage the mystery or the inscrutability of her gaze? And so she became a real muse for me in that way.
Did you ever hit upon a configuration that you liked better than others, or do you like her in all these different?
Well, I think in the North Africa one, it's a more developed painting. In these, I think of as sketches, you know, sort of leading to something. And that one, that was, you know, it's called The Brief History of North Africa, which is sort of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, where, you know, this sort of class of race and culture, and, you know, she sits squarely in the middle of it as almost possessing. You know, it's like she's possessed this space, which isn't hers, right? And she's surrounded by sort of totemic figures that are, you know, are they effective or ineffective in trying to deal with that occupation? In Saint-Tropez, in southern France, you see a lot of North Africans who come over and they're selling baubles to the tourists and whatnot. And so there's a very stark contrast between, you know, privilege and not, between white and black race and stuff like that. Then in that painting, the figures, the black figures, the man holding a small object that, you know, it's kind of like he's trying to interest her in possibly buying it. On his shoulders is a son who's carrying actually a voodoo doll. And so it becomes more of a power, a magical power kind of confrontation that, you know, maybe.
Did you feel at all uncomfortable taking photographs on the beach and stuff like that?
I didn't, only because the French are totally exhibitionists. So, you know, it's like impressionism couldn't have happened anywhere else. it's all about
So
watching.
if you were to do that at American Beach, people would be curious.
You can run into some confrontations, yeah. But it's something too where I was, I'm taking photographs with, things that kind of look like this, which don't look like real cameras, they're just one step up from an iPhone. So I think people would look at me and they would think I wasn't seeing anything. And I actually was, they were more often right. I'm not, but yeah, no, that's what I found compelling about my initial experience in southern France was how unself-conscious people were, and you were looking at body language that was very socialized. And in fact, you could take those people and you could move them from the beach to an interior space. You could put them on a couch, you could put a phone in their hand, you could move them elsewhere, and they'd still make sense in terms of body language. They weren't just simply sunbathing, they were relating to each other, only they were naked.
You ever seen any films of Eric Fischl?
I'm not sure.
Well, he has some movies, beach movies. Speak to
Oh, yeah. What's his name? Oh, Romer. Oh, they said Umer. Yeah, Romer. I've seen Claire's name and stuff like that, yeah.
Did the age of the subjects ever become a consideration for you? Because in this country, lately, even with legitimate artful photography, if you have children, it can create an unexpected controversy. Just curious about that.
Are you talking about in terms of showing work?
Yeah, just a photograph of, say, a child on the beach at St. Tropez, nude. I think I saw one around the corner. Is that ever an issue for you? I know it isn't in France, but this country's a different...
Yeah, the FBI hasn't raided my studio yet, like they did Jacques Sturgis, but I suppose that's a concern. I mean, I don't know. I'm over in Europe and they don't seem to care, and I don't. I'm sitting there taking photographs. They don't seem to care, so it's fine. And I'm not. I don't think I'm not using the characters in a way that makes it easy for somebody to abuse my intention. So,
we know that, but the others who don't understand that, they're
I don't know,
often the problem.
So the way they cleverly did this cover. I actually learned fairly early on that somebody said if you want to sell a painting, a woman in a white dress. And if you don't ever want to sell a painting, frontal male nudity.
Especially
so you weren't ready to go all the way with that.
And then,
just almost there.
Yeah, exactly.
Those 4 drawings get to that idea of context, I think, really well.
There's a mystery to the body. For me, I never question why I'm taking a photograph of someone. There's something about what they're doing that I just find myself riveted. And so if I have my camera, I click it and then deal with it later. And then it's about seeing how to explain to myself what it was that, so is it, you see this older male body naked standing there in a certain gesture, and you throw a little girl in front of it. Is it about that is it about if you put an exotic sort of Vogue model in front of them? Is it about the sort of humor and pathos of that, and etc. I mean, if you put flippers in his hand, does that change? And for me, those questions just go on, and at a certain point, it's like something connects, and oh yeah, this is what it is. It's trying to explain feelings to us.
I have 3 here, along with a number of the study paintings, as you can see just to the right. You get the happy coincidence, you have the photograph, the painting, and the study next to each other. But do you want to tell people what this event was and how it came to be?
Yeah. And but first, let me say, so you understand that I don't claim ownership for any of the meanings in my work. I make a painting that hopefully becomes evocative enough that people have their own associations with it. So the narrative, whatever narrative I'm telling, is just the one I did to get me to where the painting is finished, but it's not something that I feel the viewer needs to have, know, or be concerned with. But I was asked by the museum in Krefeld, Germany, who owns these two Mies van der Rohe residences, and they're Mies van der Rohe's first residences, modernist residences. And they use them as galleries and invite artists to propose installations that in some way engage either the architecture or the history or the, whatever. And so they asked me if I would be interested in doing and proposing something, and I said certainly I would. And I said, there used to be houses, so what I would propose would be to furnish the house, furnish the rooms, hire a couple of actors, take a bunch of photographs of the actors as though they lived in this house, and then I would go home and I would make paintings, and then the installation would be these paintings in the rooms in which the action took place in. And so that's what I did. I hired these two German actors here, and for 4 days we photographed, and it was still photographs. I had a lighting crew, but of course I wasn't, recording sound or anything like that. I'd never worked with actors before, so I was really intimidated by it. I have a lot of friends who are screenwriters or playwrights or directors, and so I asked them for advice, like how do you talk to an actor? What gets them going? Mike Nichols gave me the best advice. He said that, just give them problems. They love to solve problems. So what do you mean by a problem? And he said, really simple stuff. She wants $500 from them, but she won't tell them why. Just give them that, you'll see. So that's what I did. I would set up different scenarios in these different rooms, and I would give a problem and stuff. And not being a director, I actually didn't think I could tell whether the problem that I had given was interesting or uninteresting, and I wasn't even sure I cared, because all I was doing was looking for body language, shooting still photographs. So, but it became clear that there were certain things that they totally got a hold of, and it was riveting to watch them go through the scene. And there were other things that were just so dead that even their bodies were dead. So it was a great sort of experience for me that way.
And this created a series of paintings, not just that one?
I did you'll see them here. This is the dining room. And these are all of these are collages, by the way. They're I was taking a lot of photographs, but I liked, him in this pose here, but he wasn't here. She was in another room, whatever. I just started sticking things together when I got back and retold myself stories. So all of these are collaged together. But this is the dining room. Obviously, this is a sunroom here. Living room is here. bathroom, of course, and then the bedroom. So there were, really 4 rooms. And so these paintings hung in those 4 rooms of this house, which when they were finally shown. And we have 2 here. We have the living room scene, and on this wall behind this is a bedroom scene.
Ion Ram, but then I couldn't tell whether it was Liberace or something.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons that I chose her. They send me their websites, headshots, et cetera, he was this kind of, big strapping, 30-something, late 30s kind of German guy, and she had this kind of haircut that reminded me of a kind of Berlin or sort of the 20s or 30s. Yeah, exactly. And I kind of liked playing with that. And then one of the things that I found was that I couldn't tell whose house this was. Was it? I couldn't tell whether they were a couple or whether this was an affair. I'd paint the painting trying to answer that question for myself. And it would lead to the next painting because it left it open. I couldn't tell. I didn't know, is this like the whole scenario? Was this taking place over, a year in the life of this couple? Was it, taking place overnight? Was it her house, his house? Who were they? And so each painting tried to answer that question for myself, but I figured in terms of the painting of it, not in the photographs, but the paintings, that they needed to have some art. And so I gave them a world-class, the Germans love Beckmann, and they love Richter, and they love Naumann and Warhol, so I gave them some choice things for that, which was fun.
Well, we introduce at this point the Photoshop photographs, and you can see how the compositional process has evolved, and how, for example, with this painting here, we've got 4 of the Photoshop studies, and you can see how figures are moved in and moved out and moved left and moved right until the final painting is composed. And then one of the real treats of the exhibition for me was an opportunity to make the connection between Eric's work and Thomas Eakins' work, because I think there are a lot of similarities. And the direct link is that Eric has done a number of paintings based on Thomas Eakins' photographs. So we've got one of those paintings here, along with a couple of the watercolor studies, and then exhibition copies of the original Eakins photographs from our collection. So that the photographs belong to PAFA, and were most likely shot at PAFA. These 3 studies here of Eakins carrying a woman, which were most likely shot in our historic building, in the Frank Furness building.
That's Eakins himself?
Pardon me?
That's Eakins himself?
That's Eakins, yeah. And this is one of the controversial things about Eakins was his working with, we don't know in this case, is it a student, is it a model, who exactly it is that he's carrying, but 3 photographs of him lifting this female form. And then Eric has done these magnificent watercolors based on those photographs, and then the finished painting here, the figures are transposed to a completely different environment, to a church in Rome. So again, that context, change of context to change meaning. And then this photograph, famous Eakins photograph of the young men at the swimming hole, which forms the basis of one of his best-known paintings. Eric has taken one of those figures and done the series of prints from that left-hand figure in the photograph. So a wonderful way for us to kind of link Eric's practice to Aiken's practice, which is very much in the history of the Academy. And that brings up something that I think is really important to mention, which is, and this comes out in the interview and the catalog that you have, which is from the film that we're producing with Checkerboard Films. Eric talks very articulately about what it was like to be a young artist learning your craft in the 1970s, when if you went to Cal Arts, they didn't want to teach you how to paint. That was not what was done. It was the height of conceptual art, and if you wanted to study a traditional academic approach to painting, it wasn't happening there. So for the Academy, we are the academic approach, we are the Academy. To have Eric is a wonderful confluence, I think. How do you draw the figure, how do you render the figure with oil paint is something that you can study here, but when Eric was studying, they weren't going to teach it to you. So exploring that on his own and coming up with approaches to figure painting that are very much his own and very much also indebted to the camera, as we've talked about. And that captured moment, the figure captured as it's moving or about to move, is something that Aikens was studying. That's why Aikens was doing these photographs. He was employing the latest technology at the time, but in these more casual scenes like this, or in the stop motion photographs that Aikens was doing at the time, it's very much using the camera as a tool to capture the figure. So again, a link between Aikens' approach and Eric's approach. So it's a kind of wonderful way for us to kind of tie a lot of different things together in an exhibition.
Do I?
Yes. Did you?
I have once in a while, but I don't like it for two reasons. One is, you know, the studio model tends to take generic poses, and I don't know what it is I'm looking for. So I don't know what to tell a model to do, right? It's something where I have to see it. That's how the photograph works so well for me, because the photograph captures all of those in-between moments where somebody's actually not aware that their hand is being held a certain way, or that they're shifting a certain way. Something, and it's in those moments where animation happens. And so, from time to time early on, I would hire a model or something and try to draw, but I didn't find it compelling enough to keep up with it. But,
like they do go into a certain part.
It's like they're all ex-dancers or something.
Did you say that this was in a church in Rome? Or?
Yes, yeah. It's in Santa Maria. Huh?
Were you conscious of a kind of a reverse Curator?
I certainly was. Yeah. It was in Santa Maria in Trastevere. And I was a resident at the American Academy in 1996, and I was there a month after my father died, and so I was in obviously a very heavy kind of grieving state, but at the same time it was like a perfect time to kind of go away. And I have to say, if you have to mourn, go to Rome, because Rome's all about memory, and so much of mourning is about memory. So. But I'm not a religious person, but I'm an art person, and I spent a lot of time kind of looking at these extraordinary cathedrals and churches and the kind of religious history through the architecture that's in Rome and stuff, and it was something where part of me was still looking for a way to bury the dead. You know, that if you don't have religion, it's harder to figure out how to actually ritualize the experience of loss and stuff. So that's what this addresses. When I saw the Aikens photograph, you know, where he's carrying what appears to be a dead, dying, or wounded person, I felt that, you know, this was an image that I understood in some way. And yeah, to put it in a church environment certainly doesn't, you know, escape me that you're dealing with the Pietà as well. But I think if you want some, like a little bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of my brain, you should study those photographs on this wall in relationship to the painting that it ended up being, because it's a series that went through so many permutations of crowds and, you know, situations, how people were relating to each other, not relating, this, that, whatever. Meanwhile, the sea is getting more and more violent, and then ending up with this is the final thing that I think is a pretty clear door opening into my brain. You know, when I'm doing this, I'm not seeing him as a central character. You know, to me, I'm seeing a crowd scene, I'm seeing movement, I'm seeing characters, whatever it is, and that continues. So, but at a certain point, he clicks in as this, like, the most interesting character in terms of trying to understand what's happening. I love the way he's ignoring the, you know, sort of sensuality of this, and also the incredible vulnerability of this kid who's sitting, you know, he's about to ready to get washed away, and this guy's completely ignored. He's so self-absorbed in his stupidity. No, it's actually not. It's in the Caribbean. But, you know, at some point something takes over. I certainly couldn't have predicted it up here, that he would connect with me. So. And I don't know, maybe by the time we get to this one, the kid did actually. Whatever it is, he could give a shit.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you.